Hello and welcome to this edition of Central Connecticut Now, the program that brings you closer to the newsmakers in our area and the people that cover them for our newspapers. I'm Mike Schroeder, editor and publisher of the New Britain Herald and Bristol Press, and today my guest is Charlie Poullin, our crime and courts reporter. Charlie, welcome.
Hey, nice to be here.
Well, one thing about it is I know that you have become quite an expert in our crime and courts system, at least at the local level here.
Been trying, yeah.
And so you spend a lot of time in courthouses, in police headquarters, and watching justice being served. What are you spending most of your time on now?
Well, at the moment, there's been a couple latest arrests that I've been kind of working on. One involved a man driving up to a bus station, grabbing a woman, trying to kidnap her. Grabbing her a little bit, she yelled for help. There was a little bit of a wrestle between them. He eventually let go after she said she was going to call the cops, and drove off. Police ended up doing a search for him throughout the day for a little bit. They traced back his registration to a business in the city. As they didn't find him there, but as they were leaving the area, as they were in that area, they saw him, were able to arrest him, and charge him with several charges, including kidnapping, or attempted kidnapping, and some other ones, sexual assault. So that was something that happened last week. That was pretty big. Otherwise, it's mainly just following up on court cases and other arrests that are happening in the neighborhood.
Wow. So this being kind of toward the end of the year, what has been the biggest case that you've seen?
Well, that was a pretty big one. Around the holiday season, It's kind of been a little bit of a lull, kind of winter period. We've had the storm recently.
Yep.
That was a big day, covering all the accidents on the highway. The state police were responding to. Prior to that, really, there was recently a stabbing in the North Oak area of New Britain. There was an altercation between a man and a woman.
Are we seeing much more or less violent crime than in the past?
This year it's been kind of sporadic. There was, at the beginning of the year, I'm just finishing up my top 5 stories of the year, and this is certainly one of them. There was the shooting of a girlfriend by a boyfriend who was later arrested in South Carolina a few months later. There was that, and then there were a couple other sort of reports of shots fired kind of around March, in the middle of the year. And then over the summer there was kind of a lull again. But then recently there was that stabbing, and then there were 2 shootings before that, one in September that was fatal, and then one in the time frame between then that involved a man chasing a guy into a stairwell and shooting him multiple times. Gosh. So there was kind of a spike at the beginning of the year, kind of was down, and then it kind of picked up again these past few months a little bit. Hasn't been happening every day, but it's certainly not something you'd want to hear every day, of course. So it's been happening a little bit the past few months.
Well, you were talking about relating some of this to the weather. Have you seen correlations between really hot, really cold?
I would say typically, there was, the arrest logs seemed a little bit bigger during the summer months. People are out more. You get a lot more breaches of peace charges, which basically just disturbing public. And then now, I'd say especially in the wintertime, you can say with cars running, I know it's happened in the past. Not so much a car stolen that I know of yet, at least this year, but there's been a lot of car thefts, people breaking into cars, or not a lot, but a good amount. Those seem to happen around this wintertime period.
Is that like
for whatever
every
reason.
year, or has it picked up quite a bit this year? Or?
I remember last year, at the beginning of the year in the wintertime, there was a rash.
It would seem like you wouldn't want to be out stealing cars when it's cold.
No, I guess maybe they think people leave cars unattended a little bit more.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's one thing I guess you keep an eye out for in terms of trends in the wintertime.
Now, there's been a lot of connection between crime and poverty and drugs. Do you see that on the street?
Well, certainly, if you go to some of the more troubled areas within the city, you'll see a lot more pedestrians, walking about throughout the day, as if they don't have a job, maybe, that seem a little bit more, famished, if you will.
Got it.
And, again, this comes to mind as a North Oak area of the city. And that area has typically had a good amount of, a good portion of the arrests that we see in the arrest log, whether it be for breaches of peace or, small, petty disturbances, arguments, but also sometimes the drug arrests. And, you'll eventually see a couple people get arrested for having a hand-to-hand exchange with somebody, oftentimes controlled by with an undercover police officer. They're out there surveilling, trying to catch those people. And you'll see it in other parts of the city as well. But it does seem to be around this area, of densely populated people that are struggling a little bit more to make ends meet.
Do you see any kind of trend? Is it getting better, getting worse?
Yeah, I'll say I've noticed a lot more consistent arrests for possessions of narcotics or possession of a controlled substance, whether it be a simple small amount through a controlled buy, if you will, like 0.3 grams of cocaine or crack.
Yep.
You'll see a lot. I've seen a good amount of those consistently. So I don't know whether to say it's been happening more or police are cracking down on it more. I know the deputy chief and the chief at the police department in New Britain both kind of started in that North Oak area. Not to just pick on that one neighborhood, but so they're very familiar with it. So I know some arrests that have come out of there, maybe they are kind of using their experience to target it a little bit more and made it an issue that they want to address. I know certainly, throughout the city, there's other parts like, the east side a little bit. We'll have some trouble areas as well. Well,
is there a good relationship between the police and the residents in those areas?
It seems like it's a tough one to answer, to be honest.
Would you say it has improved? Not to say that it was horrible to begin with.
I say,
but
I'm sorry.
No, please.
I know police have tried to make somewhat of an effort. They have a substation in that neighborhood, the North Oak neighborhood, and also on the east side. Albeit it's a couple offices and a desk. It's not the most grand station, but they have it there. And I know they've said they've tried to staff it more. And try to, they've hosted ice cream socials to get involved with the community more at those areas, especially kids, to become more friendly. I'm not sure, I've seen officers, with putting boots to the ground, if you will, walking around in the neighborhood and patrolling as much maybe throughout the day or at night as they could have. I haven't spoken with police that about that just yet fully, so I'm not sure, what their strategy is. But, certainly that's always one way to reduce crime and build a bridge is face-to-face human interaction.
Sure.
From what I've heard in the past, that has worked well.
So, but that's a continuing effort.
I would say it seems like something that they want to do for sure.
Okay. Now you've seen more drug-related arrests within the recent history, anyway.
Yes.
Do you think that there is any kind of change that has led to that?
Well, like I said, I mentioned the chief and deputy chief. Might have made that a target focus of theirs.
Do you think it's more of additional enforcement versus more crime?
Well, that's one thing I think that's worth looking at. I know over the summer, the police department in New Britain, they conducted a drug sweep called Operation Heatwave, which led to the arrest of, there was at least one guy, I think two, charged with operation of a drug factory for having, a substantial amount of drugs. The others were kind of more violation of probation charges. But it seemed like from that big wave, a lot more of these arrests started happening. So it seemed like maybe they were getting more intel, if you will, from these people about, where they're getting their drugs from maybe, or just knowing that these people were arrested in these areas. Those are kind of target areas. They had another drug wave following that called Operation Cool Down.
Yep.
That resulted with the same thing. So, I don't recall there being that many drug arrests on a daily basis, per se, in the past. But so I think it's a combination of both. I think it's a fair assessment that police are also going after it as opposed to there being a lot of crime.
You observe a lot of stuff in the courts here, and do you see the same faces appearing? Let's just say on a regular basis.
One or two.
Yeah.
I would say, yeah. I see a lot of people coming in for similar stuff, if you will. A lot of similar age groups, if you will, kind of the younger 20s. For similar stuff like thefts and maybe some domestic violence cases. And then, of course, there is every now and then the guy that, was arrested earlier in the year for something is arrested again.
Do you think that their treatment by the courts, the sentences that are doled out, do the job?
Well, I think that's also kind of a similar question to, has there been a lot of crime or police cracking down? Is there a problem with these people that are committing the crime, or is there a problem with the justice system in their enforcement? I know a lot of times some of these people that are repeat offenders that were arrested the week before for larceny and then larceny again. A lot of times larcenies are like smaller types, like shoplifting.
Yep.
They typically, it appears that they, suffer with mental health issues. From police reports I've read, it seems like they've got some instability issues, and even statements in court. Public defenders, their attorneys, which can also be private, will try and recommend them for treatment of some sort as part of their sentencing. So I know they try and make an effort to address that with those individuals. It's up. Then again, it's up to the people to show up to the programs and fully commit, which sometimes they don't. Whether or not it's a fear of success or whatever it is, that may be troubling them. Again, I think it goes both ways, but it seems like the court is trying to address some underlying issues.
Now, are they able to get the treatment that the court believes they need?
Well, I know a lot of times when they request for these diversionary programs, availability for placement in them is a big issue. whether or not it's inpatient or outpatient, substance abuse treatment, family violence treatment.
So they may want, the court may want them to get into these programs, but there's no room for them.
Right. Well, the court may want to, yeah, the prosecutors certainly are asking for it.
Yeah.
But again, yeah.
So the prosecutors are asking for some kind of proactive help, not just throw them in a jail someplace.
Right. Sometimes, sorry, I meant public defenders there.
Oh, yeah, okay.
But I will say prosecutors.
They go along with it.
Oftentimes will agree. Yeah.
More or less, the system understands that the suspects or the people that are convicted of crimes need more help than just punishment.
Yes, definitely. And I would even say that they're definitely understanding the circumstances. It's when the person refuses to comply or cooperate with the programs or make the effort to show up to probation and stay away from illegal substances.
Mm-hmm.
That's when the prosecution will tend to say, look, this guy's gotten 7 chances.
Do you see things like that? 7 chances? Or, let's just say more than a couple?
Definitely. Every now and then, at least once a month, I would say, there's somebody that has been there multiple times for violating their probation, even a domestic violence. They've had 11 previous arrests for the act, alleged act.
And what do they do? What's the answer? What's the judge's answer?
Well, in those instances, it's I've seen a judge say pretty clearly, like, you've been given a chance. We've got to use punishment as part of a deterrent to others in society to say, look, and unless this is something you want to do, is go to jail, which I'm not sure that's the case for many.
Yeah.
To be cut off from people, you need to get in line.
Wow. And do they?
Yeah. Well,
I guess there wouldn't be the 8th trip or the 9th trip or the 10th trip if they did.
there wouldn't be that, no. I haven't heard of anybody recently coming back.
How about
in those
space?
instances.
How about space in incarceration now? Is there, we've heard of things, overcrowding, criminals being turned loose because there's not enough room.
Right. Well, I haven't delved into that too much, I'll
Yep.
say. That certainly is always heard as an issue. I know simply at court holding cells, there's an issue of when defendants can be called out because they're held there. It's certainly something that's tough with funding, I've heard. When we did the story on the youth prison adopting the basketball league out of New Britain, that was done primarily because they saw the success with the program, but also it was sort of a way for the program that was already put together. It wasn't affordability wasn't an issue with it.
Yeah.
It was a lot of it was donated by the program, so that helped alleviate some of the pressures for the prison.
Now, have we gone back? Have there been studies, or have we gone back to be able to see whether this is effective or not?
We haven't for this basketball program,
Yeah.
not yet. They should be wrapping up right about now.
Was it just for a defined period or
It
a
was.
test?
This is the first year of it.
Okay.
It was adopted just a few months ago, toward the end of the summer. It was, it's a basketball program that's aimed at teaching kids, having kids participate in good behavior, do their homework, show up to class, stay out of fights, stay out of trouble. That's what it was outside of New Britain, or outside of prison for New Britain. The prison thought, hey, let's try it in here and try and correct some of these behaviors so these students, these kids, these inmates can, become a little bit more reformed, if you will, when they get out. They have structural behavioral changes. So that's the gist of it.
How long do they actually stay in as a normal term?
Well, I know two people I spoke to. One inmate, he shot a guy. It was first-degree assault over a drug deal. He was there for about 5 years. Had about 2.5
And where do they
left.
serve? Where does somebody with 5-year sentence serve in Connecticut?
Well, so this was at the youth institution, Manson Youth Prison, which is in Cheshire.
Okay.
There's a handful of adult facilities around the state.
Where's the one closest to here?
There's one in Hartford.
Okay.
I know. And I'm pretty sure that one is full as well. So just to answer your question though about the data, they are looking at that, to see if there is an actual impact from the program this year, and see if they want to continue it.
Well, I'm sure you'll have a story in this sooner than later.
Well, definitely would
about
like to
that.
follow up. Yes.
Yeah. It's always hard to stay on top of, here's a test program, here's a new program. What's happened a year, 2, 3 years later to see that they actually worked or not.
Yeah.
Do you see, well, one of the things that, you've related here is that a lot of crime has when it goes to the core of it, it's either a drug problem or a poverty problem. Do you see a lot of that? Any change in that?
I would say first off, you're certainly right. Again, the people that coming in are kind of, look like they've been going through some rough times.
Yeah.
Don't want to place judgment on anybody.
Yeah.
But it seems like a community program, if you will, or mental health business, really trying to get involved with the community and
Yep.
reach out to these individuals would be a trick. Not necessarily a trick, but an answer to address some of that, because a lot they tend to overlap, like you're saying. To say if it's actually working, I don't know if I would say it's gotten better. I don't know if I'd say it's gotten worse. It seems to be going on and on. I know CMHA has just moved downtown in New Britain. Community mental health affiliates, they strive to address mental health. So I know that's one thing we are trying to look at, if that is having an impact on, providing more immediate access for these people to get health and treatment. Because I'll say a lot of times, from what we've gathered and working on other stories is sometimes these people they aren't aware of these programs and this treatment, and they don't have access to it. Whether it's, parents of children, adults themselves, children themselves, it seems to be like there's a vacuum with them within this community of, facing hard times, that if it can be penetrated and, made more aware of help that's available to them, maybe that could turn the tide a little bit more.
Well, we can certainly hope for that in the coming months in toward the next year. Charlie, thank you for joining us.
No problem.
We'll certainly have to talk again and catch up on some of these issues.
Definitely.
And we hopefully will be able to bring you back to more details on what's going on in your community on Central Connecticut Now. Thanks for joining us this week, and have a great month ahead.